Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
You ever tried to, bathroom max while you're at work? That's me right now. I've been holding in going pee-pee in the restroom for this entire recording. I may have passed out a couple times, I'm not sure, and I'm starting to think in that weird language Animal Crossing characters speak. Pray for me. But also pray for the poor souls in today's stories. They had to encounter terrifying stalkers at Walmart, deer who hunt for flesh, and strange craft in the skies. Want me to narrate your scary work story? Send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit. And want to be my bestest friend in the whole widest world? Pre-order my new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon or creepycampfirestories.com. You get a sick new book full of scary stories to share with your freaking awesome friends, and I at least get $1. Sounds fair to me. And don't forget to follow and review Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you. Now, these are Tales from the Break Room. Meet the Stetson. From Yuumi. I applied to work at Walmart in 2017, right after I graduated from high school. They wanted to put me at a register, but I told them straight up I wanted to work in the back. I'm not a small girl. I may be 5'8", but I'm built more like my dad. Broad shoulders and all that, sadly. And I've always gotten along better with dudes than girls, anyway. This is my opinion, so you can take it or leave it, but women my age talk too much. Create drama, too. Give me a crew of guys who just want to get the work done and crack jokes while doing it. They stuck me on the overnight grocery team, which was perfect. We'd clock in at 10 p.m., unload the truck, and spend the night stocking shelves while the store was closed. It was good work, physical but not complicated, and the crew was solid. And no, this particular Walmart was not 24/7 open. If I recall correctly, before COVID, many of them were 24/7 always open, but this one wasn't. Anyway, my main friends there were Ronnie, and this guy we called Pearlman. Ronnie was the class clown type, always trying to make people laugh, doing impressions that were oddly really good of customers or management. Good dude to work with, because he would make the night go by faster. Pearlman's real name was actually Pullman, but the nickname of Pearlman came about from a perfect storm of coincidences. One day at lunch, someone mentioned how his teeth looked way too white after getting them cleaned recently. Ronnie started to call him Pearly Man as a joke. Then we realized that Pearlman would be a perfect triple pun. The pearly white teeth, the fact that his best friend at work was named Ronnie, Ron Perlman, like the actor, and his last name was Pullman. The name just stuck. Now, Perlman was a hardcore gamer, always talking about whatever he was playing. He had this Minecraft phase that lasted 6 months. Then he would get obsessed with these open-world RPGs. Eventually, the three of us started playing games together on weekends, had our own Discord server where we'd chat, and coordinate gaming sessions. About 8 months after I started, they hired a new guy. His name was Stetson. I never figured out if that was his first or last name. When they introduced him during the shift meeting, the supervisor just said, "This is Stetson. He'll be working grocery with you guys." Nobody ever clarified, and Stetson was quiet, kind of awkward, maybe late 20s, early 30s. He had blonde hair, freckles, an average-looking face. I would not say he was ugly, but there was nothing special either. He did his work fine, but he kept to himself, not participating in the usual joking around we'd do. He didn't eat lunch with the rest of us either. After a few weeks, I began to feel bad for the guy. During a lunch break one day, I mentioned it to Ronnie and Perlman. "He seems so lonely," I told them. "I don't know, maybe we should try to include him in something." Perlman said, "I dare you to invite him to the Discord then. We're doing that 7 Days to Die server this weekend. Maybe he'd want to join." "Seriously?" Then Ronnie jumped in. "Oh, you're always saying we should be nicer to the new people." I rolled my eyes and told them if it gets weird, it's on them. After lunch, I walked over to where Stetson was stocking cereal. He looked up when I approached, and something about his expression was a bit strange. He smiled, but Not a typical smile. It was like he was forcing his smile to be as wide as it could go. Like if you told a robot what a smile was and they tried it themselves. I introduced myself, and I told him that I didn't think we'd been properly introduced yet. But he kept smiling that smile. By then he'd revealed his teeth a bit, and I noticed they were a tinge too yellow, almost brown around the edges. I'd never really looked at his teeth before, but now I couldn't stop staring. Maybe that's why they put him in grocery instead of on the register, I thought. It took him an awkward amount of time to respond to me. Not sure if he was processing it or what, but eventually he said, "I'm Stetson." "Right. So me and my friends, Ronnie and Perlman, we play games on the weekends sometimes. This weekend we're starting a new 7 Days to Die server. Do you play any games?" He nodded, but didn't say anything else. "Cool. Well, if you want to join us, I can send you the Discord info." And that's when things got actually weird. He started to laugh, but it wasn't a normal laugh. Like his smile, it was forced. And then when it stopped, I saw that he was crying. There were tears coming from his eyes, but his face stayed in a sort of calm smile, even though tears were streaming down his cheeks. "All right then," I said, backing away. Maybe next time." I then power-walked back to Ronnie and Perlman as quickly as I could without running. Ronnie, who had seen the whole thing, was just laughing at me. "That dude is not right," I said, and I explained to both about the crying, smiling thing. Not sure if they'd actually seen it from where they were, but even if they had, I had to talk about it. Perlman said, maybe he's just shy. This was different than that. "There's something wrong with him, I'm telling you," I said. We went back on the clock and I tried to put it out of my mind. But for the rest of the week, I noticed Stetson watching me. It wasn't constant, but I would catch him several times staring from across the store. When our eyes met, he'd look away as fast as he could. On Friday, my shift ended at 6 a.m. like usual. Eager to leave, I'm usually one of the first ones out. I walked across the parking lot to my car. It was early in the morning, so there wasn't too much light out yet. As I was unlocking the door, I heard footsteps behind me. "I knew this one was yours." I spun around. Stetson was standing only 10 feet away, looking at my car. Excuse me?" He didn't say anything else, just turned and walked back toward the store. I stood there for a moment, just dumbfounded by that statement. Okay, so my weirdest coworker has been watching me go to my car after every shift to determine which one was mine exactly. Not weird, right? And why did he follow me all the way out here just to say that? I quickly got in my car and drove home. I tried to put that out of my mind. The weekend came and went. No Stetson to play games with, and I was happy about that. The next week at work, he seemed to have gone back to normal. Still quiet, but he wasn't staring at me anymore. I figured maybe he was just having a bad or weird week last week. Everything was fine until the following Friday night. I finished my shift around 6 a.m., said goodbye to Ronnie and Perlman, and headed out to the parking lot. It was still dark. It's early December, so the sun wasn't all the way up yet, and it was very overcast. I got to my car, and I slid into the driver's seat. I was reaching for my seatbelt when, suddenly, this hand came around from behind me and covered my mouth. The hand smelled strongly of garlic. And whoever it was, they weren't holding on to me tight, not trying to hurt me or force me to stay. But the shock of it made me freeze up for a second. Then I screamed as loud as I could and threw myself out of the car. I spun around in a heartbeat and looked through the back window. There was Stetson, slowly rising from the floor of my back seat. that same smile on his freaking face. He looked at me through the window. I ran back inside the building as fast as I could. The main doors were locked, but the employee entrance was still open. I burst inside and found Ronnie gathering up his stuff from his locker. "Geez, what's wrong with you?" he said. "He was waiting for me in the back seat of my car. Stetson. He grabbed me." Ronnie looked confused. "What do you mean he grabbed you?" "He was hiding back there. When I got in, he put his hand over my mouth. 'Ronnie, please come out there with me.'" I could see he thought I might be overreacting, but he grabbed his jacket anyway and followed me to the parking lot. My car was still sitting there, driver's door hanging open like I'd left it. Ronnie walked around to the back door and peered inside. "Nobody here now." "Check under the seat. Check everywhere." He opened the back door and looked around thoroughly. "Nope, car's empty." Then he stood up and looked around the parking lot. "Hey, his car's still here." He pointed to a beat-up sedan parked 3 spaces over. "Maybe he's still around here somewhere. I can go talk to him." "No, don't. Would you mind just driving me home?" I begged him. He nodded. I was so relieved. I was shaking at that point. There was no way I was getting back in that car by myself. So that morning, Ronnie took me home and walked me to my door. "Are you going to call the cops?" he asked. I didn't really think about it till then. I don't know. I mean, he didn't actually hurt me. Just scared the heck out of me. Ronnie then suggested I talk to a supervisor tomorrow, on my off day. And I agreed. I would call him in the morning. The next day, I called work, and I got some news. My supervisor said, "Funny you should mention Stetson. His car is still in the parking lot, but we haven't seen him anywhere, and he never clocked out last night. He's not even answering his phone." I then explained to him what happened. "You sure it was him in your car?" "Positive. Same blonde hair, same face. It was definitely Stetson." "Well, we'll have to file a report with corporate, and probably the police too, since he's missing." They towed Stetson's car that weekend. Police came by the store and took statements from everyone who'd worked with him, but nobody knew much about him. No emergency contacts on file. His address led to an apartment he'd apparently moved out of weeks earlier. I let them know about the event in the parking lot. The officer took it seriously, but said without Stetson there to question, there wasn't much he could do. We never heard from him again. No explanation for where he went, no forwarding address, nothing. He just vanished, really. This story is the reason I always check my back seat now, before I get in the car. Every single time. Deer in the Graveyard. From Billy Towers. I was hired as a security guard at the strip mall on Lake Street, near a graveyard in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minneapolis residents know where this is. But for those who don't live here, there is a graveyard on a busy street near a large strip mall. In this graveyard is a family of 5 deer that live there. There's many rumors about these deer, but I'll stick to my own story. I was working the overnight shift for some extra hours. I normally avoid this shift due to the high crime rate around here at night, but bills have to be paid. Before my shift, I was talking to a friend of mine about the shift I'd picked up. He told me to be mindful of my surroundings in that area late at night. I told him I'm fully aware of what a drunk looks like at night, and I would keep my distance. But he scoffed at me, saying, "It's not the drunks you need to worry about." He then said, "Things get weird around Lake Street during the witching hour." I gave him a scoff back. Well, when there's a graveyard across the street, I wouldn't be surprised. He shook his head. "I'd be careful about the jokes you make. You never know when you'll see something you don't want to." So I drive toward the strip mall before my shift as the sun was setting. I stop at a red light near the graveyard. and I happened to look over to my right to see a deer staring at me from the graveyard. I stared back, looking at those black reflective eyes. Suddenly there's movement out of the corner of my eye. I look in that direction, and I see another deer, also staring at me. There's another sudden movement, and another deer had appeared. It wasn't long before there were 5 deer standing in the graveyard, all staring at me. I continued to stare back, wondering when one of them would move, or at least blink. That's when the horn honk from the car behind me shocked my senses, and as quickly as the deer had come, they all scattered into the night. I went through the green light I was reminded of, and I drove toward the strip mall, putting the strange staring contest in the back of my mind. I was patrolling the strip mall in my security car, just turning around at the back. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just trash littered everywhere and some homeless people that ran away when they saw my car. There was also a raccoon that I caught, ducking back into the trash can as I approached. When I got closer to the street on the other side, something caught my attention. What looked to be a trail of blood turning down the street. It felt like my heart collapsed into my stomach. Several questions rushed through my mind. Whose blood was it? Where does it lead to? What should I even do? I took a deep breath to relax myself before I gathered my thoughts. I called my partner, who was patrolling the other side of the strip mall, over the radio, and I let him know about the trail of blood. There was a long pause before he answered. Then he told me to be careful. I said I would. I decided to follow the blood trail, turning onto the side road between the strip mall and the graveyard. As I drove forward, I thought about all the things that could be at the other end of this blood, and I felt myself stop breathing for a moment. Whatever was down there, I was already on my way to face it, so I had to keep going. At the end of the blood trail was the anticlimactic body of a raccoon that looked like it got hit by a car and dragged itself as far as it could before expiring. I let out a sigh of relief and chuckled. Roadkill. This is what had me in a panic. I reached for my radio, but stopped as a shadow from the corner of my eye approached the road from the strip mall. I looked in that direction. There was a 4-legged creature crossing into the road, caught in my headlights. A deer. The deer trotted slowly through the street, then stopped at the corpse of the raccoon. I saw it lean its head down and give the carcass 3 powerful sniffs that caused its nostrils to flare before it opened its mouth. I watched in silence with wide eyes as the deer bit into the raccoon, ripping a chunk of flesh out of its body. It chewed slowly, then picked its head up to swallow, then went back down for another bite. After the deer took a 3rd bite from the raccoon, I finally gathered up the nerve to reach for the gear shift and put the car in reverse. The moment I began to move the car, the deer's head shot up, and it stared at me with cold, unblinking eyes. We continued to share a glance when it started to walk towards my car. I didn't know what to do next. Do I reverse and hope it leaves me alone? Do I ram into it and risk destroying my car? Do I get out and make a run for it? Then the thought came. I picked my hand up and slapped it on the car horn. The deer fumbled about on itself before turning to the graveyard and hopping across the fence. I looked out the window and watched as the deer hopped past tombstones and trees until disappearing into the dark. I took a moment to let my heart rate go down and properly breathe before I radioed my partner about the roadkill. I didn't mention the deer. My friend has enough things to worry about. Haunted Gym. From That Weird Girl. I teach at a small private school in a smallish city in California. This is an old school with lots of history of being super religious, bordering on cult-like beliefs. The school is also close to a big water source, which I've been told can give energy to spirits. There have always been stories about strange things happening in broad daylight that both staff and students have witnessed. I've had other experiences at this school. I may share them another time. Anyway, I was opening up the school one morning. It's usually still dark when I get to work, and more often than not, it's myself and the maintenance guy for about an hour, and that's it. As I was opening up the gym, this only involves unlocking the doors and turning lights on, I thought I saw someone or something walking by in the dark of the gym. Knowing no one else should be in the gym since it was locked, I called for the maintenance guy. He rushed over, but there was nothing there. So I continued my morning routine. I then went to the equipment closet to unlock it. That's when I noticed someone or something sitting in the bleachers. When I looked over at it, I could tell it was a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. It also looked like he had a cigarette in his mouth, but also like he was a blurry cloud of smoke. When he turned his head, he seemed to be looking past me, not directly at me. I immediately felt cold, but it was May and already humid. I looked away and looked back, and he was gone. As I turned to unlock the equipment room, it was already unlocked, with the lock hanging from the door. I knew I had not unlocked it, but I figured someone just forgot to lock up the night before. I continued on to the kitchen, and right away, I felt something blow past me. When I turned, I saw this black shadow. This shadow didn't dissipate like the first one, and it was more solid. With this shadow, I felt uneasy, like I was in danger. As I walked over to the door, the shadow did not disappear. I was beginning to feel scared, but I didn't want to call maintenance yet, as I already bothered him once, and I knew he wouldn't believe me. As I walked out of the kitchen area, the heavy door behind me slammed shut. I didn't bother checking it out. I knew whatever was in there was not human. I then continued on to the classrooms. Everything was normal, until I got to the room at the end of the long hallway. This room is separated from the other classes by a set of heavy doors and a small walkway. As I entered this room, I immediately felt a heaviness in my chest, and the room was so stuffy it felt hard to breathe. I walked further in, and I began to hear a man laughing. It wasn't a joyful laugh either. It was a very evil one. I turned to walk out, and suddenly a chair was knocked off a table. That freaked me out, so I walked out as fast as I could without running. I started to hear several voices talking too. I couldn't understand their words, but I could hear their tones, and they sounded angry. I got out of there, and I headed to the office to calm down. Once it was light out, I went back to the same classroom, and the man with the hat and cigarette from the gym was standing in the corner of that room. There was no longer laughter or voices, but I did feel suddenly more threatened this time, and I decided it was time to leave. I moved on to my other opening duties. Ever since then, I've heard the evil laughter in the gym on occasion. It's not every time, but if I never hear it again, it would be too soon. I've asked coworkers if they've seen or felt anything, and quite a few of them have. It seems like it begins in the gym. Not everyone sees the smoking man, but if they do, they tend to see or hear him again. When they do see or hear him again, it's usually not in the gym though. I don't know why he first appears in the gym, but I've done some research, and it could possibly be a former pastor of the church from many years ago. It seems this pastor was very strict with his congregation and did not respond reasonably to anything the church deemed wrong. There was a game going on in the gym one day, and the gym teacher played a popular song for the kids, and allegedly the pastor decided to make an example of the teacher by making her kneel and pray for hours each morning before the school day started. He also made her ask forgiveness from everyone that had attended the game. It was rumored he was violent with anyone who strayed from his strict beliefs. Smoking was something that was also prohibited, so when he was found to be a smoker, he was punished too, and he was asked to leave the school and the church. He was so upset, he tried to burn the school down. He wasn't totally successful. He didn't burn the school down, but he was able to burn a few classes. Those are the classes that have the most activity. The pastor was arrested but was quickly released, and after his release, he was able to gain access to the school again. Once the pastor entered the school after convincing the church board to let him defend himself, he gave a speech, and after that he was still not forgiven. He asked to gather some items he had left behind, and once on his own he walked to the gym where another church member followed him, realizing he was not going to his former office like he claimed. She wasn't able to stop him, but as she entered the gym behind him, he said, "I love this church, and I will not leave." He then pulled out a gun, and he shot himself in the head. I think he stays because he can't give up control of his church. I'm not afraid of seeing him again. I've seen him several times since the first time. But I am most terrified of hearing that horrible laughter. The night the dog said goodbye. From Knovamped. I was working a night shift at the vet clinic again, dealing with the usual stress of emergencies, tired pets, and an even more exhausting boss. He was harsh and rude, not just to me, but to my coworkers, and even the clients sometimes. His coldness made the place feel heavy all the time. Still, I did my best. I was just a vet tech student, still learning, but I cared more than most about the animals that came through those doors. I didn't see them as cases or problems. They were lives, each with their own soul. That night we got an emergency call. A large Bernese mountain dog was in distress. When we rushed to the front doors to meet the family, it was clear he was fading fast. After examining him and talking with the owners, we came to the heartbreaking conclusion that there was nothing more we could do. Euthanasia was the only way to ease his pain. His family was devastated. I remember the daughter especially. Young, quiet, tears streaming down her face as she held her dog's paw and said goodbye to him. I let her stay for a while, even though my boss would have told her to leave by now. I didn't care. She needed that moment. And so did he. We took his body to the back to bag, label, and prepare for the freezer until they could return. They wanted to arrange a small funeral, and the vehicle they needed to transport him wouldn't be available till the next day. As I sealed the bag, I felt my heart get heavy. I didn't cry, at least not then. I never cried at work. I couldn't, not in front of my boss. But later on, alone, I let the tears come as needed. Most euthanasias get to me, but this one lingered. The next day, the family called, asking if we could hold the dog a few more days. That was fine. We understood. That night, as I was cleaning the back of the clinic, something strange happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure. Large, silent, almost smoke-like, walk past me. Just for a moment, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, but I swear, it looked exactly like the Bernese mountain dog. I froze. I didn't feel scared, just stunned. It was like he was gliding. Not real, but not imagined either. About 3 minutes later, my boss stormed in, yelling at me for not cleaning fast enough. He took one look at me and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." I think I had. The dog's body was picked up a few days afterward, in a hearse of all things. The family clearly had money, but what struck me more was the love they had for him. When they arrived, I saw the daughter again. She wouldn't let go of the cardboard coffin we'd placed his body in, just held it like it was still him. like she couldn't believe he was really gone. That moment broke me a little, but I never did see the smoky figure again. I think he found peace. Maybe he just came back to say goodbye. Maybe he came to show me he was grateful, because honestly, I was probably the only one in that clinic who really cared. The other folks just seemed to want the title, the paycheck, the prestige. I wanted something else. I wanted the animals to feel safe, even at their very ending moments. A few months after that, my boss fired me. His exact words were, "You're not good enough." Well, I was still learning, still growing, but in his eyes, that wasn't enough. So be it. I don't miss the clinic. I hope it gets shut down someday, and I hope no animal soul is ever trapped in that cold, unkind place for long. But I'll never forget that dog, and I hope wherever he is now, he remembers me too. Renaissance Demon, from Jacobian. Working at a Renaissance fair is like a traveling family. Blacksmiths, herbalists, musicians, and actors who spend our weekends recreating medieval life for curious tourists. Most people think it's all fun and games, playing dress-up and playing pretend. They have no idea what can happen when the line between performance and reality gets too thin. The first time I heard chanting, I thought it was just Tobias rehearsing again. He played a monk at our Renaissance festival, and he took his role very seriously, memorizing actual Latin prayers, carrying a worn Bible, the whole 9 yards. But when I looked over from where I was adjusting my blacksmith setup that day, Tobias was nowhere near the sound. This chanting was coming from behind the privies, in that dead space between our camp and the woods. Low, rhythmic Latin that seemed to echo off into nothing. I walked over, figuring I'd find some LARPer who had wandered off from the main grounds. But the area was empty, except I did smell sulfur, which I assumed came from someone's poorly maintained camp stove or something. That happened in May. By September of that same year, I knew better. Working Renaissance fairs is usually fun. You might spend your weekends in wool and leather, sweating under the sun while tourists snap photos and argue about whether your hand-forged nails are authentic enough. But I loved it. The community and the craftsmanship, even the pretense. Our little traveling family set up in different locations throughout the season, and our festival had some of the best artisans on the circuit. This brings me to my second incident. I was working late, hammering out horseshoes by lantern light for the next day's demonstrations. The fair had closed hours ago, and most people were either asleep or drinking around someone's fire pit. And then I saw him. A figure in a black hooded robe, standing at the edge of our encampment, just outside the glow of my forge. A perfect medieval silhouette, too. Even our most dedicated reenactors didn't move like that, with these careful steps. He raised one arm then and pointed directly at me, and I swear the flames in my forge flared higher suddenly. "Hey," I called out, and I set my hammer down. "The fair's closed. Do you work here?" The figure didn't respond, instead just standing there with its arm extended. Eventually, it turned and walked into the darkness between the vendor booths. I grabbed my flashlight and followed, but I couldn't find them, and I found it very odd that there weren't any footprints in the dirt either. I mentioned it to a lady named Rin the next morning. She ran the herb and apothecary booth next to mine, and she'd been on the circuit longer than anyone. She just nodded and told me to start carrying iron. Not steel, but iron. Old protection, she said, pressing a crude iron nail into my palm. "Keep this on you." Coming up was our busiest event of the season. 3 days in the Northeast, over 20,000 visitors. The fair was massive with multiple stages, a jousting field, even a small castle facade for photo ops. That's where I first saw what the robed figure actually was. I was delivering a custom piece to a regular customer, who traveled from event to event in full noble regalia, a true LARPer. She had requested a set of ornate door hinges for her pavilion, complete with hand-carved roses. As I approached her tent Saturday evening, I heard her voice raised in distress. "Told you I don't want your blessing, please, just leave me alone." Through the open tent flap, I could see her backing away from something. It looked like the same hooded figure from before. I could see the face under the hood now, grayish pale skin, and very dark eyes. They were smiling. At her denial of whatever he was offering or asking for, he began to chant, and I was horrified to hear the same Latin chanting I'd heard before. The lady then saw me in the doorway, and she looked incredibly relieved. "Thank God, just please make him stop." He turned toward me. I didn't know I'd been gripping onto that iron nail I'd been given, not until I realized it was getting red hot. I pulled my hand out of my pocket, suddenly shouting in pain, and when I looked back up, the figure was gone. And the woman was hyperventilating in the corner of her tent. Several other vendors had come running. We told them she had had a panic attack, and nobody questioned it. That night, she packed up and left, but not before she pulled me aside and told me, "I don't know who that was, but they knew my real name, not who I LARP as. And why did they look like that? How did it know me?" Unfortunately, I didn't have any answers for her. Then things began to escalate. Our Midwest event had a reputation for being cursed. Every year, something went wrong. Severe weather or accidents, fights between reenactors that turned bad. This year felt different from the moment we arrived. Tobias found me setting up my forge on Thursday night. He looked shaken up, clutching his prop Bible against his chest, like it might actually protect him. "Hey, I need to tell you something," he said. He even looked around to make sure we were alone. "You know that Latin chanting everyone's been hearing? I know what it is." He opened his Bible to a page marked with strips of cloth. For authenticity, this Bible was in Latin, but it did have English translation in the margins. My blood ran cold as I saw it. The words he pointed to did in fact sound like the words in the chant we'd been hearing. It was a passage about some sort of demon in Revelations. I sadly don't remember the exact verse or the details, but if I recall correctly, it spoke of a demon who corrupted celebration, or maybe that he embodied celebration. I can't recall. That weekend, the sightings became more frequent. I'd see the hooded figure standing behind vendor booths, always just far enough away that I couldn't make out details. Other people started to mention it too. Sir Aldrich, who performed in sword fighting duels, said he spotted someone in monk robes watching his sword demonstration from the tree line. Rin mentioned finding footprints around her tent that stopped mid-step, like someone had vanished. The strangest thing happened Saturday night. I was working late, finishing up some pieces for Sunday's customers, when I heard someone talking nearby. The voice was low, and once again it sounded like Latin. I hoped it was just Tobias practicing early, but I knew I would be wrong. When I walked over to his tent, he was asleep, and the voice seemed to be coming from the woods behind the camp. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound, but the moment I stepped toward the trees, it all stopped. Complete silence. On Sunday, multiple vendors reported seeing the figure during daylight hours, sometimes standing right in the middle of crowds, but nobody else seemed to notice it. The tourists never asked or said anything about it. I didn't see him again, though, until November. Our last event was small, just a handful of vendors in the southeast. I was packing up my forge Sunday morning when I felt something watching me. The hooded figure stood about 30 feet away when I looked up, near our equipment shed, This time, I saw its face clearly, and it had changed somewhat. Gray skin, hollow eyes. It no longer appeared human. And in the blink of an eye, it was gone. That was about 2 years ago now. I still do the fair circuit, but I've never seen that thing again. I still love working fairs, but I'm more careful now. I take breaks, try to step out of character, remember who I am when I'm not wearing the apron. And I never work alone after dark anymore. The Beast by the Road, from Pellet Williams. This happened about 3 years ago when I was working road construction for the county. We'd gotten this contract to repave a stretch of highway that runs between 2 small towns. I can't say which ones, but it's one of those roads where you drive for 20 minutes without seeing anything but farmland and forest. The job required night work because of traffic volume during the day. Me and a couple of guys I'll call Garrett and Dwayne were on the crew that covered the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Garrett had been doing road work since before I was born, one of those guys who knew every piece of equipment and could fix anything with whatever was lying around. Dwayne was closer to my age, maybe late 20s, been with the county for about 5 years. All in all, a good couple of guys to work with. The section we were working that week was especially isolated. On one side you had the old highway we were tearing up, and on the other side was the steep embankment covered in tall grass and scrub brush that went down about 15 feet before hitting the tree line. Beyond that was thick woods for miles. During the day you might see a deer or two, but at night it was just us and our work lights cutting through the dark. It was around 2 a.m. on a Wednesday when we first heard it. We'd been laying asphalt for the past few hours and had just stopped for a break. The machinery itself was pretty quiet, and not many cars were passing by. That's when this sound came up from the tall grass. Honestly, it kind of sounded like a baby crying, but not quite right. That's what really got my attention. It was like this gurgling noise, as if someone was trying to make a baby cry but couldn't get it exactly right. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. "The heck was that?" Dwayne said. I looked over at him and he was staring at the embankment. "Just some nocturnal critter," Garrett said. He didn't even look up from his coffee. "I wouldn't go around being so paranoid about a raccoon, guys." Whatever, I thought. I'd heard raccoons before and this wasn't that. It came again a few moments later, that wrong-sounding baby gurgle. I was able to pinpoint where it was coming from a bit better. Definitely from where the edge of the grass started. "Well, raccoon or not, I'm gonna go check it out," I said. I put my coffee down and grabbed a flashlight. Dwayne looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're not actually going down there, right?" "Why not? Just a raccoon, you said. I can handle it if it's that. If something or someone's hurt, maybe we could call someone." "Look, I was joking with you guys. If it is some animal, it might be a coyote. Could have rabies. They make weird sounds sometimes, and I don't want y'all getting hurt." I looked at him and I said, "Look, I'm not afraid of whatever it is. I just gotta be sure." Dwayne rolled his eyes and said, "It's my funeral." I walked over to where our work area ended and the embankment started. The tall grass was maybe chest high, thick enough that you couldn't see more than a few feet in front of yourself. I clicked on my flashlight and shone it down the slope, but the beam just got swallowed up by all the vegetation. I stood there for maybe a minute, waiting for another sound. Sure enough, it came back. It was coming from right in front of me, maybe 10 feet or so down the embankment where the grass got really thick. I took one step down the slope, and that thing screamed. I don't mean no bark or growl or any normal animal sound. This thing screamed like a person, high-pitched and terrified, but with a horrible, wet quality to it. At the same time, something large started crashing through the grass right in front of me. In the split second my flashlight caught it, I saw a shape about the size of a big dog. back covered in what looked like short, sharp spikes. It didn't run per se, more like skittered sideways through the grass, like some sort of oversized crab. In the blink of an eye, it was gone, crashing deeper into the tall grass and down toward the tree line. I could hear it moving for maybe 20 seconds after that, branches breaking and grass rustling, getting fainter until there was nothing. I backed up those 2 steps real quick and turned around. Both Garrett and Dwayne were standing there staring at me, coffee cups completely forgotten about in their hands. "What the heck was that?" Dwayne said. So, you guys saw and heard that too?" Garrett looked at me with wide eyes. "Brother, I saw that whole thing. It stood up and took off like a bat out of hell." We stood around for the next hour, not really working, but talking about what we'd seen. Dwayne was convinced it was a chupacabra. He'd grown up in, state name removed for the sake of his privacy, and said his grandmother used to tell him stories about chupacabras. Garrett thought it was probably just some big old mangy dog, something that got real sick or even deformed somehow, which would explain why it sounded and moved so strange, but I don't think it explains all of it. Personally, I didn't know what to think. All I knew was I'd never seen any dog move like that, and I'd never heard any dog make sounds like that. We finished our shift without any more incidents, but none of us felt much like working close to that embankment. When the day crew came to relieve us at 7 a.m., we didn't mention what happened. At least, I didn't. Didn't want to spook them or be made fun of. The night after that, we showed up a little late. Traffic had been real bad coming out of town. As we pulled up to the work site, we noticed the day crew still there wasn't packing up their equipment like usual. Instead, they were all grouped up near the edge of the embankment. Maybe 6 or 7 guys total, just standing around talking. "Yo, what's going on out here?" I asked Miguel, the day shift foreman. "You ain't gonna believe this," he said. "We've been hearing weird sounds from down in that grass all day. Sounds like a baby crying or something, but not quite right. Couple of the guys seen something moving around down there too, big enough to shake the grass up pretty good. But it never comes out where we can see it properly." Dwayne shot me a look. Miguel went on. "Well, around lunchtime, Bobby threw half his sandwich down there, just to see what would happen. The thing landed right at the edge of the grass. Then this head snapped out and grabbed it faster than you could blink. Whatever it was ran off after that." "What did the head look like?" Garrett asked. "Bobby said it looked like a pit bull, but all wrong. Like the skin was missing in places, and the shape was off. Scared the crap out of him." We looked over at Bobby, who was standing a little apart from the group, smoking a cigarette and looking nervous. "Some of the guys think we should report it," Miguel said. "The others think it's some sick dog and we should leave it alone. Problem is, now half the crew is spooked and doesn't want to work this section." I could see why. Even in the day, there was something unsettling about that embankment. That grass was too tall, too easy for something in there to hide in. "You guys heard anything on the night shift?" Miguel asked. I was about to finally say something, but Garrett cut in. "Nope, not really. Nothing out of the ordinary." We worked that night, but the weird sounds didn't come back. Neither did they the next night, or the night after that. After about a week with no incidents, people started to relax, and we were nearly done with this area. We finished paving that section without any more problems. But the story stuck around for a while. Even now, if you're in the break room and the conversations turn to weird stuff, someone's gonna bring up the thing in the tall grass. And the details have gotten bigger over time, with people saying it might have been a bear. Others say it had glowing eyes. One guy swears his cousin knew someone who saw it in broad daylight, said it looked like a hairless gorilla. I don't know about that. Really, I don't know about any of it. Maybe it was a sick animal, something that got displaced when they cleared the land for the highway expansion a few months earlier. Maybe it was something else entirely. All I know is that when I drive past that section of road now, I keep my windows up, and I don't look over too long. Just in case. My wind turbine experiences, from Frank and then some. People always ask me what it's like working on wind turbines, and I tell them the height takes some getting used to. These things are massive. We're talking 300 feet up on a good day, 400 on some of the newer models. When you're that high, you see the world differently. You notice things that people on the ground never would. I've been doing this job for about 8 years now, started right out of trade school. The company I work for maintains turbines across 3 states, so I've climbed more towers than I can count. Most days it's just regular maintenance, and a lot of bird poop. But when you spend that much time that high up, you're bound to see something weird. And I've seen several things. The first thing that really got me happened about 5 years ago. I was working on a turbine, part of a wind farm that sits on top of these rolling hills about an hour outside the city, which I can't name. It was early morning, maybe 7 a.m., and I was checking the nacelle housing when I noticed this flock of crows gathering below me. Now, it's not unusual to see crows around wind turbines. They're smart birds, a little too smart sometimes. They've figured out that the towers are good perches. But this was different. There had to be maybe 200 of them, all just sitting in perfect rows on the ground directly below the tower I was on. They weren't scattered around like you'd expect, but arranged in these neat little lines, all facing the same direction. Fascinated by this behavior, I watched them off and on for about 10 minutes while working. They didn't move the entire time. Didn't make a sound either, and usually crows are noisy. Anyone who's dealt with crows knows that's weird as heck. And then, all at once, they took off. Not in the chaotic way flocks usually do, but in perfect formation, more like a Chinese military flight demonstration. They circled the tower 3 times, exactly 3 times, then flew off in a straight line toward the horizon. About an hour after that, my supervisor came up the tower to check on my progress. I mentioned the event to him. He just shrugged, said crows can be weird sometimes, but I had never seen anything like that before. And concerning crows, nothing like it since. The second incident was about 2 years after. I was at a different wind farm about 300 miles north of the first one. This one really messed with my head, as this one couldn't be explained away as just animal behavior or weather phenomena. I was doing some routine work on the rotor assembly, which meant I'd be up there for most of the day, so luckily I brought my lunch. It was a clear afternoon, good visibility for miles in every direction. Around 2, I noticed this object in the distance, maybe about 10 miles out. At first, I thought it was an aircraft. Small planes and helicopters often go by, that's not unusual. Government business or people checking property lines or even just joyriding. But this thing wasn't moving like any aircraft I'd ever seen. It was hovering, completely stationary, about 1,000 feet off the ground. I could see it clearly through my binoculars. Metallic and disc-shaped, about the size of a small house. It didn't have wings or rotors, nothing that should have been keeping it airborne. It stayed there for about an hour. I kept working, but I'd check on it every few minutes, expecting it to be gone. But there it was, just hanging in the air like someone had stuck it to the sky. I didn't hear any sound from it either, which was especially odd because sound carries really well at that height. Around 3:30, it just left. Didn't gradually accelerate like a normal aircraft. It really was just there 1 second, and the next it was shooting straight up into the atmosphere, faster than anything I'd ever seen. It was out of sight in maybe 3 seconds tops. I reported this when I got down. Figured it was some kind of military aircraft. Our company policy is to log any unusual air traffic, since it can be a safety hazard. But when I called it in, the guy at the regional airport said they had no military exercises scheduled, and no unusual radar contacts that day. Then again, how much was he even allowed to tell me? Who knows? Here's the third story. It happened about 6 months after that, at the same wind farm. I was starting to think that particular location just attracted odd things. I was up doing a gearbox inspection on one of the turbines, about a quarter mile from where I'd seen that object. It was around noon, a bright sunny day, when I spotted something in the distance again. This time I was ready for it. I had my binoculars handy, and I had my phone to take some pictures or videos. It was the same type of object, apparently. Same metallic disc shape, hovering in almost the exact same spot as before. I remember unlocking my phone and opening the camera app, hoping to start recording. And that's when everything went black. Next thing I knew, I was hanging by my harness, completely disoriented. My legs had given out, and the safety system had caught me, thank God. But as I regained consciousness, I was definitely dangling about 3 feet below where I'd been standing on the platform. That scared the bejesus out of me. I've never fainted before in my life, not prone to any fainting spells or epilepsy or whatever. I'm in good shape too. Don't even have blood pressure issues. But something about being unconscious that high up, even with a safety harness, made me realize how dangerous that could have been for me. When I looked around to see if the object was still there, it wasn't. I have no idea how long I'd been out, but according to my phone, I'd been hanging there for about 40 minutes. This one I decided not to report. It seemed useless last time, and I was afraid I'd get in trouble if I told them that I'd fainted on the platform. Odds are they may have never let me up on a wind turbine again. I couldn't risk that. Now here's the fourth story. This one is the creepiest, and it didn't involve anything in the sky. It was about a year ago at a wind farm built on what used to be farmland, near this old Civil War battlefield. The battlefield itself was about 2 miles away, marked with one of those historical plaques and everything. I was working on a turbine that had been having electrical issues, so I'd been up and down that tower several times over the course of a week. It was the only turbine in that whole farm that made me uncomfortable. I really couldn't put my finger on it at first. Just a bad feeling, like I wasn't alone even though I was. Well, that day I was about 250 feet up, adjusting some wiring in the nacelle, when I felt something grab my ankle. Not brushing against it or bumping it, but grabbing it. Like someone had reached up from below and wrapped their hand around my leg, right above the boot. I looked down immediately, but there was no one there. I was alone on the tower, harnessed in properly. There's no way anyone could have been that close to me without climbing up, but I could feel the pressure, like fingers pressing into my leg through the coveralls. It lasted about 5 seconds, then released. I was so shaken up that I came down immediately and didn't go back up until the next day. I told my supervisor there might be a wasp nest near the platform, anything to avoid explaining what had actually happened. But the same thing happened again when I was working on that turbine. An ankle grab, always when I was focused on something else, never when I was recalling it happening before and actually paying attention to if it might happen. And when it happened again, it was strong enough that it actually shifted my weight, made me stumble against the railing. I finished that job up as quickly as I could. Then I asked my supervisors if someone else could be assigned to that wind farm, if it needs anything in the future. One of them gave me a raised eyebrow, but they approved it. Later on, when I talked about this to some of the local guys who worked in the area, one of them told me he'd heard stories about that place, said the land was straight up haunted. He didn't know the specifics, but he did say apparently during the Civil War battle, he wasn't sure which one it was, a lot of soldiers died, and where the wind farm was, allegedly, there was a hospital barracks. Now, I love ghost stories, but I'd never been much of a believer. I listen to podcasts like this because they're fun. But I'll tell you this. When you're 300 feet in the air and something you can't see grabs your leg, you start to think things a different way. Well, that's all I've got for now. I love this job. Who knew wind turbines could be creepy, right? Look, I may not have a fear of heights, but I do have this odd fear of looking up at the sky or at tall things. So, wind turbines would be a no-go for me. I nearly messed my pants as a kid, just looking up at the big Walmart logo at the front of the store. Anyway, thanks once again for tuning in to another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can follow me on X at Dark Prevails. And you can pre-order my upcoming new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon or at creepycampfirestories.com. It's the perfect book for those in the market for a collection of terrifying stories that will scare the pants off your friends. Thank you. Send me your scary work stories at eeriecast.com/submit so I can narrate them on the show. And help us grow to reach more scary story fans out there by following and reviewing Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you. Until next time, everyone, it's time for me to clock out, 'cause I'm gonna go Stetson hunting. That nerd needs a wedgie, and my hands are itching for a pull.